Necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the plea of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves. Those are the words of William Pitt the Younger, which is why I've got his bust next to me today whilst I do this video, because necessity is the argument behind ID cards, and it is the creed of slaves. It is something that only an overmighty government would want to do, and it fundamentally changes the relationship between the governed and the governing. I also have with me two of my favourite books from the library, both by Sir John Fortescue, the 15th century political writer and chancellor. The first is a learned commendation of the political laws of England, and the second is Fortescue on monarchy. Why are these books important? Well, they explain the relationship between the ruler and the ruled in England and in France. And these differences have continued, have cascaded down the centuries, and are why we and the French have a different concept, a different understanding of freedom, to which an ID card is fundamentally antithetic. But let me start with the reason the government has used for wanting ID cards. The government wants ID cards because it thinks it will stop illegal immigration. This is not true. Just put yourself in the position of a visa overstay. You've got a job, you've been working for below the minimum wage for some time, you know that you're living here illegally, you're worried that at some point the authorities may catch up with you. Do you suddenly then decide, suddenly come to your senses and say, well, actually, I've got to have digital ID, therefore I'm going to work legally? This makes no sense at all because the current laws are very clear. Employers have to check that people have the right to work here legally. They've already failed to do so when they're employing somebody who is here illegally, a visa overstayer, and therefore they are quite content to continue to do so and to do so again in future. People are already taking a risk, they're already failing to meet the compliance that the law requires. Every so often firms are fined for this, but they find it worth their while for the low wages they can pay to employ these people, and the workers think it's better to be in this country on a low wage than to be in their own country. They are economic migrants trying to make a better living here, but doing so illegally. Identity cards will make no difference. What about if instead of being a visa overstayer, you're actually somebody who's come over on a small boat? There you are, you're in France, paid thousands of pounds to people smuggler. You're about to get on the boat into that dinghy to cross the channel, and suddenly you hear there'll be a digital ID card, and you say, oh, woe is me, I'll actually now stay in France. This is just nonsense. That those people who've already decided to make that journey will continue. They know they're breaking the law. They've already broken countless laws to try to get here. Do you think that chap who pretended he was 17 when he was 23 would suddenly have been deterred by being told he had to have a digital ID card? So the argument for it is untrue, and the change in our relationship with the state is fundamental. One of our great freedoms in this country, and this is what Fortescue explains, is that the King of England is under the law, not the law, whereas in France, the King of France is the law. And this has continued down the ages, that the continental system has a very powerful state, and the English, now British, now UK-ish, if you prefer, system does not. In our country, you have always been free to do anything that is not specifically prohibited by law. On the continent, the general principle is the opposite, that you're only allowed to do that which you are specifically permitted to do. And therefore, you have a culture of showing your papers. Why? To show that you're allowed to be there, you're allowed to do it. Here, that's not true. But when you stay in a continental hotel and they ask for your passport, why do they do that? Because in many continental countries, they have to tell the police who is staying with them. In this country, if you stay in an hotel, they don't have to tell anybody. You have to register on the electoral roll, but you don't then have to spend every night of the year where you are registered. And if you go somewhere else, even if you go somewhere else for months, as long as you're registered at your primary residence, somewhere you would call home, you do not have to tell the police or any authority that you have moved. And this is fundamental to our freedom. We are free to go about this country as long as we are obeying the law without any interference from the police. This is not true on the continent. The police are entitled to stop you and ask you to show your papers. This is something that we have fought against, that we have been against as a nation for hundreds of years, because we believe we should be entitled to have the state as our servant, not as our master, the king equally beneath the law as we are, that common law principle. And the timing of this coming from Labour is appalling. It's appalling on two grounds. First of all, it's appalling because it's being done by a desperately unpopular government in the hope of regaining some popularity. It is a desperate move, but it is a clear socialist move. The socialist has always believed that the interests of the state should be put first. That's what they have done every time they've been in government. Why did Tony Blair want to introduce ID cards? Because he wanted control. He wanted a continental style of government. Why did Labour not abolish identity cards immediately after the war? Why did it take the Conservatives to do that? It was because they like control of our lives. They believe that they can lead our lives for us better than we can do it for ourselves. So that's the first reason it's a bad idea. But the second reason it's a terrible idea is that we have been losing confidence in the police. The Peer-like principle that the police are us and we are the police has fallen out of fashion because the police have been policing freedom of speech. So we've gone from a country where the police would never have knocked on your door to say, you've put something rude into Twitter. Well, Twitter didn't exist, or you've said something rude in a newspaper article. It wouldn't have been any of their business, to one where the police are routinely knocking on people's doors, asking them about what they have said and what they have thought, even arresting people for praying. And this has undermined confidence in policing in this country in a very damaging way. And at this point, to give power to that same police to say, who are you, is such an important change in how we live and how we operate with the state. It will make the relationship between the citizen and the police much harder, because instead of seeing an amiable person who is on our side, we're seeing somebody who may say, where are you going? What are you doing? Show me your papers. It's fundamentally wrong. H.A.P. Taylor could write that before the First World War, as you went about this great country of ours, you had no interaction with the state other probably than the post office. That you never had to show your papers, show who you were, feel that you were involved with a state that was overmighty. The state was the watchkeeper state. It allowed people to get on with their lives. Now, increasingly, the state is involved in our lives and therefore feels it's entitled to tell us what to do. And the identity card is the absolute epitome of this, of power being taken. And historically, it is the totalitarian arbitrary state that wants to know your movements, wants to restrict your movements, even if that restriction is only one that you create for yourself, the self-censorship mode. You think, I don't want to be stopped, so I won't do that. Something perfectly legal and legitimate. It is a real threat to our liberties to solve a problem to which it will make absolutely no difference. And therefore it's very important that we oppose it, that we maintain our freedom to get on with our own lives, our freedom to live in a way that we choose, not in the way that the state feels good for us. Because once this is in, it will be amazingly easy to add information to it and to try and direct and nudge us to do things that are thought to be good for us. Why do I say this? Well, increasingly it's easy to maintain records, a one-stop shop for the government. Doesn't it sound marvellous? But the one-stop shop for the government then means that the government knows everything about you. It knows where you work. It knows how you pay your taxes. It knows your benefits. It knows your health records. And lo and behold, it can put this all together. And it can say, well, look, we're treating you for a health problem. that's your fault. You should eat fewer Smarties or whatever it is. This is where the state is able to use information to exercise control. Not just the theoretical control of show me your papers, but the detailed control of lifestyle, because you're not doing what the state wants, and then it can tax to try and stop you doing it. We're already seeing this in a broad brush way with sugar taxes and bans on caffeinated drinks, the nanny state trying to tell us what to do. Just think how much greater that can be if all your information is stored at one place with the government. I don't want a one-stop shop with the government. I want a multi-stop shop. I don't want my health records and my records with the taxman to be held in the same way. I want them to be entirely separate. I don't think HMRC has any interest in my NHS records, and I don't think the NHS has any interest in my tax records. Separation is a good thing. It is beneficial. It is enhancing of freedom. And of course, they'll promise us that this won't happen. But why should we believe them? Why should we believe a government that is telling us it wants to do something for a reason that is palpably false? It is doing it for other reasons. It's doing it because it wants control. And this is before we get on to the topic of whether the government has any ability at all to carry out such a scheme. The competence of government large-scale IT schemes has been woeful. Think of the Horizon scandal in the post office and the people who went to prison because of the government's sheer incompetence, inability to do things properly. The chances of failure are very high. Let's go back to Pitt the Younger. Finish where we started. Pitt the Younger was the man who saved us from Napoleon. And how did he do this? He did it because he shored up the finances of the country, and he had a very clear sight of what the liberties of a Britain should be, as has his father, Pitt the Elder, before him, two of our greatest prime ministers, as it happens. And he devoted his political career to ensuring that we were free. And he sometimes had to do things that made us less free. For a period, habeas corpus was suspended. But there was that big overriding picture to get to liberty. Think of Churchill when we did indeed have ID cards during the war. We had that because of his overriding ambition to protect, to enhance our liberties against a major threat. Both of them succeeded. Both of them succeeded in avoiding the continental system being imposed here, which is fundamentally hostile to freedom. It puts the state first and the individual second. I'm with Pitt, I'm with Churchill. I put the individual first and the state second. I put necessity and convenience second to liberty. And I put the dishonesty of socialists who always want to control your lives at the very bottom of the list. Thank you for listening.